Hello and welcome to a new tutorial. Today's video is on how to sew a Victorian corset top. I've previously posted a video on how I drafted the pattern I'll be using to cut this top with, and I'll drop the link in the description box. So today I will be transferring my pattern on my fabric. I'm using Ankara prints and I have my lining piece. I also have my fusible interfacing, which I will be attaching on both the fabric and on the lining. And I also have my bonings. I have the plastic boning and the regline boning, which you can sew on, so you can decide which one to use. And also on the front part, on the bust region, I would be padding using my wording. I would not use a bra cup for this tutorial. So to cut out the fabric, I've placed my fabric on fold and I've measured half-inch seam allowance all around except for the hem part, which I measured 1 inch hemming allowance for. And the center front is on fold. I'll call the center front on fold, so I placed it at the edge of the fabric that I folded, and other pieces will be cut two pieces for each. So I'll go ahead and cut out my fabric, and after cutting the fabric I'll then use the fabric to cut out the lining piece. So here are the pieces I've cut. I've also positioned them accordingly from the center front to the center back. I've also used the fabric to cut out my lining piece, and I've ironed stay on both the fabric piece and on the lining piece. So now for the front part, I will be padding, like I said, I'll be padding with a wording. So I have my number 1 2 3, which it will be where I will pad for the bust. That's the bust region. So I'm going to remove this the side front, and then I'm going to concentrate on the numbers 1 2 3. So I'm going to pad this region from the center front to the front part where it's labeled 3. So I'm going to pad from the under bust. There is where my padding would stop, from the top part to the under bust. So I'm going to indicate the under bust on these fabrics. I'm going to indicate them. I'm going to draw on the under bust, and also on the top part I'm going to remove the half-inch allowance I added. I don't want my wording to get to that point, so I'm going to trace that out, the under bust for the fabric that has number 1, number 2, and number 3. So I would mark out the under bust region, and on the top part I would mark out half-inch because I don't want my wording to get to that point. Then I would cut out my wording using these parts. I would place the wording on these pieces and then iron it on them. I'll iron my wording on these parts. So the wording I'm using has a fusible part. The shiny face is the fusible part. So I'm going to place it and iron on and trim out the parts I don't need. That's what I'll do for all these parts, and I'll show you. So I've attached the wording. You can see what I have. I've laid all the front pieces, and note that the wording is only attached to the main fabric. It will not be attached to the lining piece. So how I'm going to join them, I'm going to join them center front, the number 1, I would attach it to the number 2, and then the number 2 to number 3, and the number 3 to the number 4, and I'll do the same to the other side. That's how I'll attach it, and I'll be attaching from the lower parts. I would be pinning. I would pick the center front and the number 2. That's number 1 and number 2. I'll pin them together and attach them. I would pin this way. I'm pinning. I will sew from the lower part to the upper part, and then I'll attach the number 3 to the number 2 and the number 4 to the number 3. So that is how I will attach all of them. So I'll go to the sewing machine and show you how I'm going to attach join this together. So I'm going to start sewing. I've pinned all the pieces one side together, 1 and 2 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and also the corresponding back side for this particular side I'm sewing. So I'm going to sew using half-inch sewing allowance because that is what I left for it. So to make this easier, especially for a beginner, you would just use a pen and mark out the half-inch you'll be sewing on. That is what I've done on all the pieces. I used my pen to mark out half-inch. That way it will be easier. I'll just sew on the line I've made with my pen, so you don't have to worry about it showing on the fabric since there is an interfacing. So I've used the pen to mark out the half-inch, and I'm sewing on the on this half inch, and I'm sewing from the lower part to the upper part. So I would just keep showing you. I'll just show you how I'll join everything. I've joined 1 to 2, so I'll be joining the second one to the third one for the front piece. So I'll go ahead and sew this way and join just one side. Make sure I join everything together, then I'll join the other side the same way. So when sewing the curved part, take your time, especially when you're joining between the number 2 and number 3 of the front part. Don't rush, take your time to sew the curved part very well so that you get it very well. So I'll just keep quiet and then show you how I'll join this. So the way I'm joining the main fabric is the same way I'm going to join the lining piece. So I'll um, just let you watch how I'm joining these pieces together. So after joining the front pieces together of one side, I'm going to attach the side back to the side front. So I'll attach the side back to the side front, that is number 2 of the back to the number 4 of the front part, and then I'll attach the number 2 of the back part to the number one of the back part. So after joining this side, I'm then going to join the other side from the center front to the number 1, 2, 3, 4, and then to the back pieces. So I've done all that. I've joined all the pieces together. I've ironed the seams open, and I notched the under bust and the curvy part of the front part, and I ironed the seams open. So I'm going to fold and trim out the excesses I have at the top. In case there are excesses, I have few some parts that are not equal, that are unequal on the upper part. So I'm going to trim out those excesses so that everything is equal at the upper part. So what I do to the main piece, like I said before, that is the same way I would join the lining pieces as well. So here I've also joined my lining pieces. I've joined them together the same way I did for the front part. I ironed the seams open. I also notched the bust region and also the under bust area. I ironed the seams open. So I'll be attaching my boning to the lining piece. So I've cut a strip of fabric. The width is about 2 inches. So I would be placing that on the seams I have on the lining piece, and I would sew this on one side and on the other side so that I can use that as my boning channel to attach my boning. So I'll do that on all the seams. I would do that except for the seam joining the front part to the back part. So I'll do it for all the other um, lines. Then after that, I would want to reduce the length of this lining piece by half inch because I don't want the lining piece to be sticking out after using it to turn the front part. So I'm reducing the length from the lower part, from the hem part. I reduce the length by half inch. So I've also made an extra channel for boning close to the center front, half inch away from the center front. So I made another boning casing. I attached a boning casing there, though there is no seam allowance there. So I made an extra boning channel there. So after that, I'm going to use the lining piece to turn the neckline for the main fabric. I'm going to place them right sides facing each other, and I'll pin them, making sure that the seams on the main fabric match with the seams on the lining piece. And then I'll go to my machine and show you how I'm going to use this to turn the main piece. So I've pinned them all together. You can see how I've pinned them. So I'm going to sew using half inch allowance. That is what I left um for turning the neckline. So I'm going to sew using half inch seam allowance. So I'm going to sew following the curve in front. I'm sewing on the half inch seam allowance, and as you can see, the wording did not get to this half inch seam allowance. But in case there is a point, or when you're sewing there is a point that gets to the seam allowance, just make sure you trim off the wording, the part that is getting into the allowance, just like I'm doing here, and then continue with your sewing. This would make it relax after sewing and top stitching without having bulkiness at the top part. Everything will relax properly. So I'm done joining them. So what I'm going to do now will be to notch this seam I've just made. I would notch all round. I'll notch very close, cut close, but not cutting through the seams. So after notching all round, I'm going to open them up and then top stitch. You can see how I'm pushing the seam to the lining piece, and then I'm going to top stitch towards the lining piece. So the seam underneath is facing the lining piece. So I'm just going to top stitch. So as I'm top stitching, when I get to the curvy part, that is the bust region, I'm going to put my hand and drag, and make sure I drag the lining piece so that the seams are well separated. It's not folded when I'm top stitching. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm making sure that there is no fold at that curvy part, and then that's how I'm going to top stitch. Take my time, top stitch to the end of to the other end. So after top stitching, I'm going to insert my bonings to the boning channels I've created before joining the lower part, using the lining to turn the lower part. So as you can see, I've inserted bonings on in some of the channels. So I'm going to insert this last one I have. So I'm going to insert, you see how I followed the curve so that the boning follows the body curve. That is how I inserted. And at the edge, I burnt them using lighter to burn the edges so it will not be hurting on the body when it's worn. So I've cut the boning to the size where I want to put, and I burnt the end, and I cut the boning short by ½ inch where I'll be joining the lower piece. I won't let it get to the part of the allowance for joining um the lining to the main fabric. So I'm flipping them right sides facing each other, and I'm going to make sure they match at the lower part, just like what I did when I was turning the upper part. Then I'll also close the sides. But before doing this, I'm going to have made strips for the loops. I've made strips using bias. I've sewn them together, and I've cut 2 inches length. So I'm going to place my loops on the lining, just the way I'm demonstrating. I'm placing them on the lining piece, and I'm going to sew them, giving 1 inch interval from the top to the bottom. And at the bottom part, I would not attach any loop where I would have my seam for joining the main fabric and the lining piece together. So after doing that, I'm then going to sew them on the lower part. So I've joined them on the lower part, and I've also attached the loops. So all I'm going to do now will be so close the sides, the center back. I'm going to close that up. Then I'm going to open a space on the lining where I did not attach any boning channel. So I opened up the space that I would turn this out from. So I've done that. I've sewn everything, and I've turned it to the right side so you can see what I have. See the space from which I turned that out. So after turning this out and ironing properly, making sure that everything is okay, I would use a needle and thread to sew that part closed. Also used bias to sew the row for my lacing, for lacing the back, and I have a length of about, I think, about 90 inches of length. So this is it, guys, on how you can make your own Victorian corset top. Thank you guys for watching. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you have not subscribed, and also turn on the notification bell so that you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. So guys, this is what the top I just made looks like. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe if you're yet to subscribe to my channel, and also turn on the notification bell so that you'll be the first to be notified every time I upload a new video. And please check out other videos I have on this channel. See you in my next upload. Bye.